What happens when the Spanish think your sauce is so bland, they make their own version? Well, if you're French, you're gonna add it to your mother sauce list. That's right, this week we're continuing our French mother sauce series with Espagnole. So let's learn about that on Bon Appetit. This week, I wanted to learn about the Espagnole sauce, a French mother sauce that started out as a brown sauce, but with a little bit of Spanish influence, became what we know it as today. For this recipe, we're gonna need 3 3/4 cups of a dark brown stock. For this, we're using beef. We're also gonna need 6 tablespoons of butter and 6 tablespoons of flour for our roux, and we're gonna be using 1.5 ounces of tomato puree. We're also going to be making a satchel of spices and herbs with 1 bay leaf, half a teaspoon of peppercorns, 3 stalks of parsley, and 2 sprigs thyme. Now with those ingredients, let's get started. Just like in all of our previous mother sauces, we're gonna start by heating up our stock, just so that we don't get any lumps in our roux by adding a cold liquid. We're gonna let this heat up on another burner, and we're gonna make our roux. As always, I prefer the rounded bottom pan because it makes it a little bit easier to avoid the flour hiding from you. We're gonna add our 6 tablespoons of butter to a pan on medium heat. Now you might be asking yourself, Bob, why in the world are we using so much butter and flour? Why is this recipe nearly 3 times the size of the last couple of mother sauce recipes? And the reason is because this recipe actually takes a little bit longer to make and is designed to have the liquid cut down in half. This concentrates the flavors and makes it just mwah. But when I was first attempting this recipe and I tried it in a much smaller batch, I ended up with so little sauce that I couldn't even use it in any recipe. For that, I am seriously recommending you stay to this size. I know it's a lot, but you'll actually be able to keep it in the fridge or the freezer, and it'll last you a little while, so make the big batch. But it's a lot of butter. Once your butter is melted and frothing or bubbling, now we're gonna add in our flour. Especially because there's so much, we're gonna add a little bit at a time and stir it to incorporate it. This not only helps you to control the roux, but it also helps to ensure that there are no lumps. Nobody wants a lumpy roux. Now in the previous videos, we have made a white roux, which is cooked just long enough to get the flour flavor to disappear. A blonde roux, which is cooked just long enough for a little bit of browning to happen. And in this one, we're going to be making a brown roux. The big difference between all of these is the amount of time that you let the roux darken over heat. If you wanted, you could cook this on medium for about 5 minutes. But the difficulty there is that if you overshoot, it can darken pretty quickly. You can lower the heat a little bit to say a medium low and do it for about 7 to 9, maybe 9 to 10 minutes. You're going to be less likely to make a mistake, but it does take a little bit longer. Generally important for cooking is that you don't just cook with time, you cook with your senses. So something we're looking for in this is the actual color of the roux to start to turn brown. You can also cook with your nose in that if it starts to smell burning, turn the heat down. Now that our roux has reached light brown, come in with the tomato puree, plop that on top, and then add in a little bit of your stock and start whisking. Get this fully incorporated before you add in some more. Be sure to only add in a little bit at a time. If you add in too much at once, it'll just splatter everywhere. Believe me, I know. Bring it up to a boil and then add our satchel, making sure that the cheesecloth is perfectly wrapped up so that nothing can spill out. It doesn't have to be pretty, you're just trying to make it so that you don't have to strain out a bunch of extra herbs at the end of this. We left this extra long so that you can just tie the string to your pan. You'd never know I was a Boy Scout with how poorly I'm tying this. If your cheesecloth happens to dunk down pretty deep, you can just pull it right back out. Whisk it down. Now that it's boiling, we're gonna lower it down to a simmer and let it sit for an hour. Now, as you're walking around the kitchen, getting up to go to the restroom, grabbing a snack, you're gonna see a film form. Just make sure every once in a while to stop by and scrape off the top of this. Fun fact, when King Louis XIII was marrying Anne of Denmark, who was the daughter of Philip III of Spain, in their wedding ceremony, it is said that the Spanish chefs were going to take the then brown sauce to be made for Anne and thought that it was a little bit too dull. Now, a brown sauce at the time would have been made with a roux that was brought to brown and a dark stock, but they thought it didn't taste great. So they took a then common Spanish ingredient, the tomato, and put it inside of the stock. This turned it into the Espagnole. And the dish was so loved that this became known throughout France and was included in Créme's original list of 4 mother sauces, beating out, ironically, what was a brown sauce at the time. This dish is now so famous, it is often called the brown sauce. This is only one of the myriad of tales for how this sauce came to be, because as with all great dishes, everyone wants to lay a little bit of claim. I personally really enjoy that story, so I'm sticking to it. It's been an hour and our Espagnole has reduced by almost to a half of its original size. Fun fact, if you wanted, you could add some more stock and continue to reduce it further and further, and you would end up with one of the more common daughter sauces, the Demi-Glace. So we're good to go. What we're gonna do is we're going to remove the satchel and press the juice out of that, and then we're going to strain the remainder of the Espagnole into a glass container, and salt and pepper to taste. And now let's taste our Espagnole sauce. This is a deep, rich sauce on its own. This thing is fantastic, and I can see why in my research it has some of the most daughter sauces. Definitely can stand up to something like a steak, potatoes, and hearty vegetables. I decided today to do it with steak and potatoes. For this recipe, I will be using 2 potatoes that I have sliced into 8 wedges. I am then adding 1 tablespoon of olive oil and salt, pepper, and other spices. Going to mix them in a Ziploc bag, put them on a baking sheet, and then bake them at 425 for 25 minutes. And then for these, I may actually just pan fry them a little bit in some steak fat. So let's give that a taste. The sauce is so rich and delightful, and the concentrated flavors of the stock and that sachet are just coming out. It is nice and robust and stands up to the steak and the potatoes perfectly. I am so happy that I learned about this sauce, and I am super excited to continue down my journey of learning the French mother sauces. If you liked this video, please hit the thumb, ring the bell, and subscribe to the channel. This helps us out tremendously. I am also excited to announce that we will be starting a recipe site where you can find these recipes as well as the ones I've done previously. I'll be sharing the link down below. If you're interested in knowing my steak recipe, just comment down below and I'll make sure to put that on the new recipe site. I chose steak and potatoes. What would you choose to pair this sauce with? We'll catch you next time on Bon Appetit.